Hello, everyone. Hi, Professor Moerschel. And to everyone, welcome to our first Harmonic Youth Orchestra's first summer festival. We're super happy everybody's here and to have Professor Moerschel with us. And now I'll hand it over to one of our hosts, Ivan Law, to introduce our first guest.
Hi, Professor Moerschel. How are you doing?
Good. How are you? Nice to see you again.
You again, too. So Jonathan Moerschel is a violist of the renowned Calder Quartet, which enjoys a diverse career, playing both in a traditional quartet literature, as well as partnering with innovative modern composers. The quartet has had recent performances at Lincoln Center, Walt Disney Concert Hall, as well as London's Wigmore Hall, Barbican Centre, and the Salzburg Festival. Moerschel is a lecturer of viola and chamber music at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and he has collaborated with eminent musicians Joshua Bell, Edgar Meyer, Paul Neubauer, Stephen Tannenbaum, Joseph Kalkstein, Claude Frank, Menachem Pressler, Anne Marie McDermott, and he plays the ex-Adam Jaspero da Sola viola made in the late 16th century on a generous loan from the Stradivari Society. So, Professor Moerschel, if you could go into detail about how you started your career in music and like what drew you to music, that would be awesome.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here with you all, and it's exciting to be having these discussions. So I grew up in a musical family in Boston. My father was in the Boston Symphony. My mom was a professional pianist. And so there was always music going on in my house. And although we weren't forced to play anything, we were encouraged to, pick an instrument. So we all played piano. We all then did some string instruments. So I had always wanted to play violin. I actually started on violin. And my parents had chamber music reading parties. And so I was kind of thrust into that at a really early age. Even though I had a hard time keeping up, they sort of just kept pushing me to do that. And like a lot of my friends, I found it much more fun to play in an ensemble than to be playing by myself. And so, I did the school orchestra. The city I grew up in outside of Boston, Newton, had a really great public school music program. And so I got to know a lot of other kids my age playing. And so we did school orchestra, and then we have the New England Conservatory here, a preparatory college. And so I got involved playing in the youth orchestra there and chamber music, and eventually going to music camps. I met a chamber music coach there who thought that I was maybe much better suited to the viola. I was very tall, long arms, big hands. And so he suggested that I might consider playing viola, and that was when I was in high school. I was 16, and so I started playing some chamber music and fell in love with being an inner voice. And so sort of 2 years left of high school, and I decided to make the switch to viola at his encouragement. I had a really good mentor in this teacher, and he said, if you work really hard these next 2 years, he said, I think you have a good chance of getting a scholarship into college and having a career. And at that point, I kind of decided that chamber music was the career I really wanted to pursue. But some people come to it kind of late. I was lucky that I started really early, and I had time to sort of consider going into non-music ventures. For a while I was thinking about engineering because I was interested in that, but I had a hard time imagining my life without music in it and without playing every day. And so I had a desire to leave the East Coast and kind of travel further afield, not out of the country. So I went to California to study at USC, figuring that was about as far away from home as I could get without leaving the country. And that was kind of where my quartet started. The Calder Quartet started. We were all sort of freshmen, sophomores in college, and needed to fulfill our chamber music requirement for undergraduate degrees. And some of us had known each other from music camp and decided, we should play together. And we just never stopped. And gradually, did some competitions, but it was sort of the love of playing chamber music that kept the group together. And that was sort of officially 1998 when we started, and we've been going ever since. And that kind of, all the years, playing chamber music and traveling the world, it kind of spawned interest in teaching, and it just sort of rather by happenstance, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, but it was kind of because of the quartet that I got into studio work in LA, playing for motion picture and TV soundtracks, which I've been doing for about 11 years now.
Awesome. That's really cool, because I know a lot of people are they struggle finding quartet members or people to actually play with. So hearing where you got your start, that could help people where they are now, or if they're interested in going to school for music, that would be good for them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges in a chamber music career, and one can certainly have a chamber music career and not be in a string quartet. I mean, you can be a freelance chamber musician, just playing chamber music at festivals and around the world, and that's really rewarding. But it was that relationship, sort of long-term relationship and shared musical goals that I was interested in as a string quartet. And it is very difficult to find for like-minded people. And it's not that you have to agree on everything. It's that you have sort of a shared interest in what the final product is and how you're going to get there. And I think it was beneficial for us because we were all about the same age. We were all sort of on a similar trajectory with school. And so, we started at USC and ended up staying for 6 years. I did undergrad and master's there. And then we all finished there and then decided to pursue studies at the Colburn Conservatory. When they first opened, we were the 4/5 of the first graduating class at the Colburn Conservatory. And so we did 2 years there together. And then we all packed up and moved to New York to go to Juilliard for artist diploma in quartet studies. So, that's not an easy thing to get everyone to agree to uproot your life and move across the country. So I think we were lucky that we all shared that desire to keep studying, keep improving. We went over to Europe quite a bit to study, and, it all sort of takes away from other things that people might want to pursue. So it's a sacrifice because, playing in a quartet takes so many hours of rehearsal, and it takes away from other pursuits. And we decided, midway through actually maybe it was probably like 3 or 4 years into the quartet playing together, we decided that we would all dedicate, our lives to playing in the quartet and let's just see what happens. But we knew that it was going to take 100% commitment from everyone, meaning nobody was going to go out and do orchestra jobs. Nobody was going to go pursue other things. We were just always available for the quartet. And so it was a sacrifice for many years, but, to me, I think, and to my colleagues, it was totally, totally worth it. And lucky that we were all able to do it. We found programs at school that were able to support us while we were studying. And that was really critical too, because obviously, at a certain point you have to pay your rent and bills and things like that. So to have a program where we could focus on studying and rehearsing and still be able to pay rent, that was pretty amazing too. And now more than before, there's these quartet residencies for graduate quartets, more and more around the country. There were only a small handful when we were in school. There was New York, Yale, and NEC, and maybe Cleveland had one. I'm trying to remember, but there was really you count them on one hand, and now there's double or triple that now. So there's many more options, but there's also many more quartets. So there's a lot more competition.
Yeah. Speaking of that, with all of the things that you have to do with the quartet and also outside of it, because you're a teacher, how do you manage your time being in a professional quartet, also with like outside things such as teaching and other projects recording wise?
Right. That was tough. And as I said, maybe for the first 12, 13 years, we didn't do anything else. So as we sort of progressed through our career, me personally decided that I wanted to have other things. I wanted to pursue teaching because it interested me, but also I figured at some point maybe I wouldn't want to travel so much, and at some point maybe I was just sort of thinking down the road future that either the quartet wouldn't continue or I wouldn't want to continue, and so I wanted to pursue teaching. That was something else I'd always sort of envisioned for my career was playing and also teaching, and so that was tough. I just sort of had to. I mean, the beauty of teaching individual lessons is you can schedule that. I was able to schedule it, and thankfully I've, for the most part, had students that were very understanding of maybe lesson time shifting on a weekly basis, which they continue to do. But I felt that it was, as difficult as that was for scheduling, it was advantageous for the students for me to have all this experience doing other things, playing in the studios, playing in freelancing in some of the orchestras in LA, and I was able to bring that experience into the lessons, so I felt like it was beneficial. But it's a jigsaw puzzle, like any most musicians most of the musicians I know have lots of different jobs in the music industry, not just playing in one orchestra, and so that's just part of life, is understanding how to sort of fit it all together. We work on the weekends, we work at night, we work in the morning. It's a lot, but to me that makes it really interesting that there's it's great to have the quartet, but at a certain point I also realized how great it was to play with other people, and both socially, but also it helped me sort of think outside the box a little bit and see some of this music differently, because I would play chamber music with other people in the LA area or around the world, and it was so great to sort of approach this music in a different way. I thought it was really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Speaking of like approaching music in a different way, one of the questions that we had was about sound and like what does it mean to you, or like specifically in a group sense, and like how would you work with your other quartet members to find that unique sound for you guys?
That it was not something that early on we were sort of encouraged to think about. I think it was just sort of sheer volume of hours that we just sort of started to arrive at our sound, and it wasn't anything specific. I think it was it started off actually experimenting with our seating. Sort of traditional American quartets have the viola sitting on the outside, cello sitting on the inside, and we had gone to Europe to study sort of privately with this chamber music guru over there, and he had said, well, based on like your instruments and the timbre and your individual sounds, he said, you should think about sitting with the violist on the inside. And for whatever reason, it had never occurred to us, and that was sort of a turning point in the concept of our sound. And it's different for every group. There's a number of different ways that a quartet can sit. But it sort of had the focus a little bit more on the sound coming from the bottom up. And we had one chamber music mentor talk about sort of, if you think of sound as fitting into a bowl, like the four sounds fitting into a bowl, the cellist as the lowest voice has to create the bowl, and then all the other players have to fit their sound into that bowl. Otherwise, the sound won't blend. And for us, that was sort of a way to visualize the sound, coming together. And but I think just it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of listening, and honestly, a lot of what we did was when we were in a concert hall, because the sound in a practice room versus sound in a hall is totally different. And we spend so much time practicing and rehearsing in small rooms, and you're sort of thinking sort of theoretically. You don't actually have practical experience until you get in the hall. And so at every single concert, when we had our dress rehearsals, sound checks, we had one of the quartet members go out into the hall to sort of get a sense of the balance and the sound. And gradually over time, we noticed patterns in both halls, but also ways we needed to adjust our own sound in order for each voice to be heard. And it was kind of interesting how inner voices, and I think the balance for inner voices, is perhaps the most difficult because of the register that inner voices play, but also if for our seating with the viola on the inside as well as second violin, you're that much further back. And so it was a lot of trial and error. I would say there's no magic magic remedy to find a group sound. It is every sound is really different. And I think if you listen especially to a lot of older quartets playing where it's less processed in the recording, where it's analog recording, you hear even more the difference in sounds. Some quartets sound a little more treble, some sound a little bit more bassy, and that's just individual preference. But there's the Juilliard Quartet, the old Juilliard Quartet. I remember hearing many times when I was a kid here in Boston. And one thing I always appreciated about them was that despite how blended their sound was, you could always get a sense of the individuality of each player. And I think that was one thing that we really tried to strive for, was having a really great blend and unique sound for the group, but also maintain the individuality in each player, which to me made things blended, but also really interesting, so that each voice could be highlighted. Each voice is an equal 25% of the group, and it's important that we hear all the voices.
Right, I agree. That's something that, as you probably already know, our quartet is going to be working on a lot in the coming school year.
Yeah.
Onto another question. This is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about
Sure.
like your background in music, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. But how did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in music in like a chamber music setting, or what were some of your like biggest influences, and how would you advise like others kind of like figure out like maybe like their particular music avenue for music?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, I think. I mean, if you think about it, like, of course, we all dream of being a soloist when we're young. It's like 1% of 1% of all musicians, have a solo career, really. And that sort of level of competition, that just didn't interest me. I was never interested in competition. Of course, at some point we all do competitions, chamber music, solo stuff. And the way I looked at the competitions was not to win it, but it was, to me, the process that doing competitions is a way to get better really fast. It's the level of focus and the way you sort of tune your ears to every little detail in your playing and in your sound. That was what I got out of doing competitions. That and listening to everyone else play. Not only just do my my audition, but try to go listen to everyone else, so what the judges are looking for, what everyone else is focusing on, and it's a really great way to learn. But that was not something I really wanted to pursue. But I went to music camp when I was, I think, in middle school, and like 7th grade, I think, was when I first went, and I was sort of reluctant to go, but my parents kind of forced me to do it. And it was this small camp in rural Massachusetts, almost into New York, and it was just such an intimate experience, and everyone plays chamber music there, and then there's a little bit of orchestra, and I just realized how much more fun it was to play with other people, and it was inspiring. And when I heard people that were really good, better than me, I was inspired to practice and get better. And I don't know, I found every summer I went there to be really inspiring. And I, had coaches there that were encouraging, and as I said earlier, a mentor who kind of pushed me in the direction of the viola, which is something I never would have thought about. Back then, everyone made fun of the violists, and but it was to have somebody say, you're good, and you keep practicing, you could have a successful career, and if you really like chamber music, this would be a good thing to do. And I didn't have that. I mean, I had musical parents who were always supportive, and my dad, as a orchestral musician, was always trying to push me in that direction. And it just never really, I like orchestral music, but it was just not something I saw myself doing. So I think it was a combination of things, but it was, sort of finding this network of other students that were in love with chamber music, like I had sort of found a love for, and then finding mentors that kind of helped guide me, because it's not, at the time there was no internet, and so everything was word of mouth. And when I was looking at colleges, the internet was just kind of starting up, and so we were just sort of early days of email. But most universities didn't, and conservatories barely had websites, so it was not so easy to research schools and teachers and see where students were going. And now with the internet, it's so easy to sort of research, and that's, I think, what students are doing now. So there are many more resources available now than when I was a student. But I think it was sort of finding a really good network of friends that were playing, and we played together, and we had chamber music reading parties, and it was so fun. And my goal for it was to, it's work, but that it had to be fun and stimulating, and I had never regretted that.
Yeah, I personally haven't gone to many music camps, but I feel like I wish I would have, because I feel like I would have met like a lot of people and like made a lot.
Well, there's still time. I mean, you start with like music camps, up until you go to college, and then you start going to music festivals, yeah. And it's a huge networking opportunity to meet. I can't tell you how many people that I encounter in the professional world that I met at music camp or at music festivals. Once I got into college, these people I played with. I mean, our former second violinist was in the quartet was somebody I met when I was 12 years old at music camp, and that's how we ended up being in a quartet together. I think that's a huge thing. But also, it's like that the momentum that you build up when you're at summer camp or summer festival, where you don't have the distraction of school and sports and all these other things, and then you really just every day it's just music, but it's in such a fun setting. There's an intensity to it that is really thrilling, and I found myself improving really fast over the summer, and then having that momentum going through the summer into the school year with lessons and chamber music and orchestra and all that. I mean, it was I found sort of exponential growth artistically and instrumentally.
As a group, like what did it look like traveling to like all of the like different music festivals and stuff like that, travel wise?
Oh, well, as a quartet, we used to drive a lot of places together, all in one car, just sort of piling everything in, and sharing hotel rooms, sharing beds in hotel rooms, which, as 4 guys was not fun. But I don't know, it just, at the time, that was just what we did, and I remember driving from one festival. We were in Aspen, Colorado, and we had to drive all the way to Lake Tahoe. Like, it was just such a long drive, and we couldn't afford to rent a car. where we were trying to rent a car, and I think one of our chamber music coaches, heard how expensive it was going to be, and like loaned us his car so we could, drive all the way across Colorado and Nevada to get to this festival. And it was, back then it was all fun. It was, but at a certain point, after 15 years, we're like, okay, separate rooms and separate rental cars, and then we were on the road for like 5-6 months a year, kind of all combined, and it was that started to get hard, and we used to sit together on the airplane, and then gradually everyone's in a different part of the airplane, and occasionally have a meal together with some of the guys, but we tended to do other things, which I think it was important. We didn't spend so much time rehearsing together and playing concerts, and it's such a intense experience doing that you need time away. And I think that's when other people in the group, we all started sort of pursuing other interests, while in the quartet, so that you're drawing on your other aspects of life and bringing that into your music making. And I think it actually really adds to the group. And I remember once talking to the violist, the original violist. Actually, he was the only violist of the Tokyo Quartet. And it used to be 4 young Japanese guys. And they all had the same teacher over there. The violist and the 2 violinists had the same teacher. Cellist, obviously a different teacher. But I asked him, well, what was it like? Because gradually, members left, and then it was 2 British guys, and then a Canadian. And he said, well, it was a little boring because they agreed on everything. They never disagreed because they had like same teaching, same everything. And he felt like once they brought new members in from, different reaches of the world and different training, that it got really interesting because they started to disagree, which, as you probably know, a large part of rehearsals is disagreeing on things, and then, arguing for your idea and trying it, and, seeing what works best. And that's a huge part of rehearsing. And so, it's good. It's good to have that diversity, because you bring a lot more ideas in, and sometimes you really get attached to your own idea and argue for it. But then, you listen. We did a lot of tape recording, and so that was our sort of 5th voice, because when you have 4 people, it's easy to get deadlocked 2 and 2. So we would record, and then we all agreed that whatever the recording came out, that was the way we approached it. And so anyway, it's good to have lots and lots of ideas. And but yeah, but it's it can be grueling, especially if it's you're on a road for a long time.
Yeah, and a lot of quality time together.
Yeah. We would. Well, that's why we always sort of insisted on taking a month off, usually in August, because it was towards the end of August, things kind of quieted down after the summer festival season, and so we did a month off every year. We tried to not email. It was just separate time, and I thought that was really healthy.
Yeah. Moving on to our next question. For those who are like interested in pursuing a career in like a chamber group, how would you go about, like, how did you guys specifically, or like in general, how would you like go about making a name for yourself, or like what, and also what would you consider like a successful career to be?
Well, those are all hard questions. I think we probably all have our own barometer for what is successful. I mean, successful for some people might be, well, they're able to, make their living completely from chamber music. Other people might say, well, successful is playing concerts that are really enjoyable, and, finding like-minded musicians to play with that could be successful. For a lot of people, chamber music career is one aspect of what they do. But, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And obviously my experience is mostly as a string quartet, so I'll kind of focus on that. We felt early on that, okay, we could do, competitions, but that wasn't we didn't enjoy doing it, and we had some success, but we realized that that wasn't really gonna build a career. It opened some doors, but it doesn't, it's not like it used to be, like, before my time, winning a competition could, really start your career. For chamber music now, in the last, 2 decades, it's mostly been just a step along the way that is helpful. But I think, we're a good example of a group that never won a competition. We, placed in competitions, never won. And I think we've had what I would consider fairly successful career. So for us, I think we felt that the best thing that we could do for ourselves was to play as many concerts as we could early on. And so we did we built our first press kit, which was basically a folder with a group photo. I think the photo, we paid $50 to some like crazy guy in Hollywood to take this picture of us in his living room. And so we stuck that in there along with a demo CD we had made. And there was a quartet in LA that was sort of they weren't full-time, and it was a bunch of studio players. And for whatever reason, they had published on their, sort of rudimentary website all of the places that they had played. And so we basically took that list and cold called every single presenter on that list with our press kit. I think we mailed out like 50 press kits. And, nobody knew us, but we had the CD in there. And but we ended up getting about 25 concerts out of that, in Southern California. And there were at the time a lot of presenters in Southern California, a lot of church series and things. We did a couple of performing arts centers, but it was a lot of church series. And so we just got to play a lot, and we became sort of the yes quartet. Anytime anybody wanted a concert, we just said yes. It was not about money. It was just about playing as much as we can. And I think that really helped a lot, because it gave us some experience playing in front of people a lot. It gave us some experience dealing with presenters that were not going to start a career, but it's just sort of how to sort of communicate with presenters and come up with programs and all that. So it was just getting some experience under our belt. And I think that was really helpful, so that when it came time for some, bigger opportunities, we weren't quite so green. And I think another really important factor in our career was our interest in new music and living composers. And the Aspen Festival in Colorado, they have a Center for Advanced String Quartet Studies, and they would bring in 3 pre-formed quartets and spend the summer there just rehearsing and playing concerts as a quartet, and it was terrific. And we were there and talking to someone on the faculty. We're interested in new music, and did he have a suggestion of some composers or quartets to look at? And he said, well, why don't you look at Christopher Rouse, who American composer, lived in Baltimore and was teaching at Aspen. So we were able to call Chris Rouse and meet him there. And he said, well, nobody plays my quartets anymore. And so he gave us the music to one of his quartets, and it was one of the most difficult things we'd ever seen. And so we just spent the summer learning this quartet, which, as a young quartet and being subsidized by a music festival, we could spend as many hours as we wanted, rehearsing. And Chris really liked the way we played it. And so when it came time for the festival to program his music, they asked us a few years later to come back and play a professional, recital of Chris's music. And so it was, we developed these relationships with living composers. That really gave us some really tremendous opportunities. Probably one of the bigger names was Thomas Addis, who's lives in London and part-time in LA, and really international name, mostly in opera, but he's written a number of string quartets and a piano quintet. And we recorded his music and played the piano quintet with him. And so periodically we'd get invited to these festivals to play his music and play with him. And so that was really sort of our entrance into a lot of the big venues was our relationships with living composers. So that was, that would be another avenue for a young group to explore, is to, that is new music. But we decided still, while we were, in our third or fourth year, that we didn't want to be only a new music group or only a classical group. We wanted to do both, that it was important. It was interesting. The relationship of the old and the new was interesting to us, and we wanted to explore that in our programming. And not every quartet does that, but that's was our interest. So I think, finding an identity as well is really helpful, early on, so that you can focus. Are you interested in new music or the classical canon, or both? Or I think presenters these days are looking for innovative programming and new ways of listening. And so I think it's all very different now than it was for us. But looking back, I think a lot of the same ideas still apply. It's just there's a lot more competition. There's just so many young, terrific quartets out there. And so it's just sort of figuring out how to sort of showcase yourself, both your playing, your sound, and your programming, I think are really critical. And also how you interact with people is, a lot of presenters just want to make it easy. They don't want to have, difficult groups to have to deal with. And so I think just also being really nice goes a long way.
Awesome, yeah. One more question, and then we also have 2 questions that were dropped in the Q&A section.
Sure.
For obviously this is all from your perspective, but what was the most beneficial, or what do you think is the most beneficial aspect of chamber music, overall, in a college setting, or just in general?
So beneficial aspect of a chamber music career,
or not really as of a career, but just chamber music in general, that form of music.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, again, to me, it's I think I mentioned earlier that playing in an orchestra was not really my cup of tea, and to me, what interested me about chamber music, in addition to making music with other people, was that it was one on a part, primarily one on a part. And so that in itself adds a level of intensity. And so that means you really have to keep up your playing. You have to play your part as if you're playing a sonata or a concerto. It has to be that level of understanding and technical mastery. And to me, I found that so stimulating, to know that I was going to be heard, and I needed to be at my best every single time I got on stage. And I found that thrilling, but also inspiring. Both when you're playing in a group and one of your colleagues does something really beautiful, and you have to, respond to that. It can be such an amazing experience, and I don't know that you always get that. At least I didn't find that when I was playing an orchestra. So it's that sort of, you're up there having a musical conversation with people, and you can do something a little bit spontaneous, and they're listening and they just respond, and it's not something that's planned out. And those are the moments that I think, as a chamber musician, I live for, is that spontaneity when, we rehearse and it's hard work, but it's rewarding. But then you get up on stage and somebody does something that was so beautiful that they never did in rehearsal, and they did something different, and it can take you off guard, but it's so wonderful when you have those moments, those unexpected moments. And I think that's sort of the magic of chamber music, is the ability to do that. You can't, in an orchestra, that spontaneity is not so easy to happen, because you have so many musicians on stage, so it has to be a little bit more planned out. But the spontaneity in chamber music, I think, to me, is perhaps the best part of it, is that intimate quality, and the idea that you're 4 people on stage having a conversation, and you can decide to do something in a moment. unexpected, and if you've got good colleagues, they'll be there, and I love that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've missed, like online and everything with COVID.
Yeah, there's no spontaneity with online recording. So we're all, I've only recently, I was in the middle of a quartet tour in Hawaii when the pandemic hit, and I had to sort of rush home. And I didn't play with my quartet for about 15 months. And, I think we were all a little wet in the eyes when we had our first rehearsal, because, the musicality and the sound and everything is still there. We're all a little rusty with our ensemble ears because we haven't been, using them. But, I realized just what I had been missing, for that year. That was the longest I've never played quartet, was, in my entire career, was that year. Longest I ever went was a month, right? We took that month off every summer. So it was, it's something that, whenever I have a break and come back, it always sort of gives me the chills playing the quartet. And especially some of my favorite repertoire. Never tire of it. Never, like Beethoven is kind of my favorite. Any of his chamber music, and I'll never tire of it. And it's that intimate quality it's so terrific.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're gonna do some of the questions that are in the Q&A that some people did. The first one is, when you were just starting your undergraduate and chamber music career, what was your practice routine? I.e., which areas did you focus on? What was the way you practice influenced by other musicians you played with in your chamber groups?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because when we started, we were still all undergrads. So, we were still playing our, student recitals and playing in other people's recitals. We were constantly practicing, just our individual instruments in addition to our chamber music. So I was practicing, 3-4 hours every day for sure, plus practicing my chamber music. So it's, I remember talking to Earl Carless, who used to be in the Juilliard Quartet many decades ago. And I had asked him how he, maintained his, playing when they were touring a lot. He said, well, he practiced 3 hours a day. It was an hour of scales, an hour of Paganini, and an hour of Bach. That was just his sort of maintenance stuff. And I mean, that's hard to do, especially if you're also teaching and, doing other things, need to have a family. And, for us as students, we could spend most of the day practicing. We had classes and things like that, but not too bad. And so it's we had a lot of early morning rehearsals and early morning, individual practice, late at night stuff. So as I said earlier, that when you're in a quartet or any chamber music, you're really a solo part, and you have to have your part learned and the score learned. You have to understand what all the other parts are doing and how everyone interacts. So it's a lot of study also, not just practicing with your instrument, but score studies, so that you're aware of what everyone else is doing and how your part fits in. So everyone has a different routine. I know the violinists in the group did a lot of scale practice. I did a fair amount of scale practice, and especially when you're on the road and don't have a whole lot of time, I felt like scale practice was really important to maintain. And a lot of slow practice of my parts. I had all my parts marked up, places that every single time I played the piece, I knew I needed to practice them. And so I had all that marked up so that I could go through systematically and just keep sort of maintaining those passages. But yeah, you can't ever let the practice go. That was the thing I learned early on, is that you still have to, keep practicing, scales and all that stuff. And there was another part of that question, I think it disappeared here.
Was the way you practice influenced by other musicians you played with?
Right. Yeah, that was interesting too. As I said, as we were all studying, we kind of got on each other's face about, some of our individual parts. Like, we were young and inexperienced. So when somebody was having trouble with a particular passage, we would all sort of weigh in on suggestions of how to practice, from our various backgrounds of study, have you tried, raising your arm or lowering your arm, or, try this part of the bow, or, different hand positions. So, as you get more established, that's territory you can't really, delve into professionally with another player. But as young students, I would say we got into that more than, sometimes more than maybe we should have. But, it was helpful to have input from a cellist or from a violinist on a passage I was doing. And we had mentors. One of them we studied with a long time was Ronald Leonard. He used to be in the LA Philharmonic and taught at Colburn and USC. And he was great at just sort of throwing out ideas about different things. And I remember, specifically one thing he was asking me in a melodic passage, and he asked me, "Do you always keep fingers down, when you're playing another finger?" And I said, "Oh, sometimes just so as a reference, if I'm coming back to that finger." And he said, "Well, what if you don't do that? What would it sound like?" And, it sort of opened up the hand to make it more expressive, and, little things like that. So it's, I can't really cite any one person. I think it was just being open to ideas from other people, and especially as students, I think it's helpful to and discard the rest, but it's helpful to just have lots of ideas. I think as a young musician, just getting tons of ideas is really helpful.
That's awesome. Another question that we have is, what advice do you have for college musicians interested in starting their own chamber group?
Yeah, I mean, look around you at who's in the room with you. We always said that when we gave talks at schools. It's like, look around next to you. These are people that you will likely be working with or working for. I think it's helpful to find members in your age group, because you're probably all, along the same trajectory in terms of, maybe one of you, you don't have children yet, you don't have a mortgage or anything, you're a little bit free of those things, so that should you decide to move across the country together, you could do that. So, but I think it can be helpful if you're friends, but you don't have to be friends with the people you're playing with. I think it's like finding people that, mutual respect for each other and respect for the music, that I think can lead to the longevity. Because, as musicians in general, we spend our lives being criticizing ourselves, and always feeling like we need to be better. And so you have to find musicians to work with that understand that, and that we all want to get better, and we have to find ways to communicate that don't get personal, don't come across as criticism, but as like support, and that we say things in a way that can help somebody feel good about what they're doing and want to improve and help improve. And I think a lot of disagreements in quartet come down to communication, and you can get the same point across. One way will sound like a criticism, and one will sound like a constructive comment, an observation. And so I think learning how to communicate verbally as a quartet and as a musician, I think, is so critical, because you try to explain an idea. You say, "Hey guys, so can we try it this way?" And there's some perfect way of talking about music. So trying to find ways to communicate so that you can get your idea across, because it can get frustrating if people aren't quite understanding it. And so I think communication is such an important skill as a chamber musician, because that's pretty much what you're doing all the time.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely something that is, especially with like the pandemic and not being in person, that's something that's going to just have to like come with a lot more time, a lot more effort.
Yeah, there's this one word that I think is a big trigger for in a lot of situations in relationships, and a quartet is a series of relationships, and the word should, like you should do that. To me, I know I react in a way that is not helpful when somebody says you should do that, and so I think little things like avoiding that word and coming up with like, have you ever thought of trying this, or have you considered this, and it's like something as simple as that can make all the difference when you're in a working relationship. And when inevitably when you spend we rehearsed 5 days a week, 4 hours a day was kind of our regimen, and then if we had something big coming up, we would do double 4-hour rehearsals, morning and then at lunch break, and then an afternoon evening rehearsal. And that's a lot of time to spend together with anybody. And so finding ways to communicate, knowing when to let it go, it's sort of an art of working, figuring out how to work together, because it's a complex series of relationships as a quartet, and it is tough, but totally worth it.
Definitely. And then we have one more question from Karis. And it's specifically about viola repertoire and chamber repertoire. But what was a piece of viola repertoire or chamber repertoire that has significant meaning to you, and how did it change your view of playing the viola?
Oh boy, let's see. Well, that's a little hard to answer because I spent a lot of time, as a kid in his sort of early years in the viola. Doing like sight reading parties, and so I got to read a lot of chamber music, and it was all really fun. And of course, as a young musician, all you want to do is play Brahms, but I think when I really got into the Beethoven quartets, Beethoven string quartets, that's where I really knew that I was in the right place, because as an inner voice, especially in Beethoven, you have a sort of dual role. You're both an upper voice and a lower voice. And sort of when I discovered that for myself, I thought that was just the most amazing thing, that I got to go back and forth. I got to, I had been a violinist. And so as a violist, I realized I still got to do both. I got to be the lower voice and the upper voice. I got to have, so much great repertoire in the chamber music literature for viola. The list is endless between, the Brahms string quartets, the piano quartets, the viola quintets, the sextets, and then all the Beethoven quartets. They have really terrific parts. The Mozart quartets, the Mozart viola quintets. I mean, there's so much repertoire that is great for viola, and I like having my solo moment, but also being a supporting role. I love going back and forth. But I think, the Beethoven quartets, the middles and the late quartets, to this day, still, I'm astounded by them. And I played them all. I've done a cycle of them, and I've played the late quartets a lot. And to me, those are sort of the real pinnacle of string quartet writing. And as an early student, I was encouraged to not play them because I was told that we weren't ready. My feeling is, I don't know if we're ever ready. They're so complex and so many subtleties that I think you have to start sometime, and that every time I play them, I make new discoveries and have desires to play it differently. And so I would have to sort of generalize and say the Beethoven quartets to me are the best of everything. There's great moments, and I love being the inner voice because I can watch everything, listen to everything going on, and they're so conversational. So I think that was when I started out. That's where I wanted to be. It was sort of like my goal was to play all of the Beethoven quartets. But when I got to the got to study and perform the late Beethoven, I felt like I had finally made it, because that's what I really wanted to do. That and the Bartok string quartets are also, we did the cycle a number of times, and that was sort of like, if I think back to our early days, we had written down sort of our goals as a quartet, like long-term goals, and the Beethoven cycle and the Bartok cycle were our two things I really remember on our list of things to do. And both those groups of quartets have really terrific viola parts, but it's not all about focusing on the viola. I think it's just I think the emotions and the vocabulary and the tonal colors on those that music, to me, is it's hard to imagine it's written sort of by humans. It's just, there's just so much perfection. It's like nature. This perfect, and that to me, the Beethoven is like that. I'm continually in awe and inspired by that music.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to get to play them, play the Brahms and Beethoven last year.
Yeah.
But yeah. So,
yeah, that's the music. That's why I do what I do, and that's why I love helping other students learn how to play that music, because to sort of have them experience what I've experienced through playing that music. That's my desert island music, Beethoven quartets.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but this has been
Okay.
so special for us. Professor Moerschel, thank you for giving us a glance
My pleasure.
into your life as a chamber musician and a professor. And to our attendees, we hope that everybody enjoyed, and we hope that you will attend our next event at 1 p.m. where we'll be talking about the college admissions process for musicians in the 21st century. Oh, did I cut out? Maybe. Anyway, yeah,
Nope.
good. Yeah, bad connection. But thanks, Ivan, for hosting, and thank you again, Professor Moerschel, for being here with us.
Yeah, really great to chat with you all. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.